Thank you, and good afternoon to all of you, and welcome to this gender side event called Can SAIs Afford to Ignore Gender Equality? My name is Petra Schirnhofer. I'm a manager in the Strategic Support Unit in the INTOSAI Development Initiative, and I'm the host of this panel discussion today. The video we've just seen, I think, gives a convincing answer to the question whether we can ignore gender equality. And I think the answer is quite clear. It's no. Yesterday, in the morning discussions, gender equality was also raised as an issue. And one of the messages in the video was that we need greater accountability for commitments made. And I think this is where SAIs step in, because SAIs can assess government action on gender equality, and they themselves can lead by example as institutions. I'm here today with a fantastic panel consisting of 75% males and 25% females. Usually it's the other way around when we talk about gender equality, and most are members of SAIs. According to the last global SAI stock-taking report and survey, this is exactly the ratio of male to female heads of SAIs, by the way. So this was actually a deliberate decision to have 3 committed male leaders in our panel, as I think we need to engage men if we want to step up on gender equality. Now, let me quickly introduce the 75 and 25% in my panel. Next to me, we have Tsakani Maluleke. She's Deputy Auditor-General of South Africa. In 2014, she was the first woman appointed to this position. She's a qualified chartered accountant with 20 years of private and public sector experience in related fields. Welcome, Tsakani.
Thank you.
Next to Tsakani, we have Michael Aguinaldo. Michael is Chairperson of the Philippine Commission on Audit since 2015. He's an attorney by profession, and he has over 27 years of professional experience. And only recently, the Commission's engagement for gender equality has paid off, because the Commission was given an award by the Philippine Commission on Women in recognition of its significant contribution to gender equality and women's empowerment. Congratulations and welcome. Next to him, we have Osvaldo Christian Rudloff. Osvaldo is head of the International Relations Unit at the SAI of Chile. He also serves as Executive Director of OLACEFS, and as many of you may know, many SAIs from OLACEFS also participated in a cooperative audit on SDG 5 on gender equality. Welcome, Osvaldo. And last but not least, we also have Einar Gørrissen. Einar is Director General in IDI, but Einar started as an auditor. And since 2014, he's heading IDI. Einar is also a member of our gender team in IDI. Welcome, Einar. And welcome to all of you, and also to the audience for being here. I would like to start this discussion by asking all of you a rather personal question. I would like to know why gender equality is important to you. Let me maybe start now with Einar, because he was the last one introduced.
Thank you, Petra. I think to me, and I think the video says it all, I think we all have a moral responsibility to create a better tomorrow for the next generations. I think we all share that vision. We want to create a better tomorrow. And really, if you want the world to actually be able to face the substantial challenges we are facing in a successful way, I think gender equality is a must. It's not something we cannot solve these problems without gender equality.
Thank you, Einar. And for those of you who are tweeting, gender equality is a must. So, yeah. Well, Osvaldo, how about you?
Hello. Hi. Well, I'm very used to receive that question. I lead
till now 2 coordinated audits in gender within at the OLACEFS region. And people continuously ask me why you, as a man, are facing this challenge. And I said, well, because I'm a human, and we are talking about humanity. In fact, we're talking more than the 50% of humanity. So I think it's very important to work together in achieving the goal 5 and all the targets on goal 5.
Thank you, Osvaldo. Michael. I think it was switched on.
Hello? Yeah, okay. Simply put, I have a wife, I have a mother, I have a sister, I have nieces, and I have cousins. So I think that answers the question.
Thank you. Tsakani.
So for me, I take very seriously my role in leading the SAI that I work at. And if I think about it carefully, if we say that we want to deliver value and benefits to citizens, and we want to do so through competent people, we want to do so through credible results and thereby build public trust, it just makes sense to reach out to get the breadth of talent available to help us to do this competently. It helps if we can look other organizations in the eye and show that we as SAIs are doing that which is important. And it helps when we have the benefit of insights from women and men so that we can actually add value. So it just makes sense.
Thank you. Well, thanks for sharing these personal insights. And I hope all of us in the room will agree that gender equality is important. But I think if we dig a little bit deeper, we might quickly find out that, you know, there needs to be more awareness, and sometimes it's, you know, not easy to understand how SAIs can contribute to this. So this brings me to my first round of questions to my panelists, looking at the present context of their work. Let me start with Michael. Michael, the Philippines has introduced gender-responsive budgeting some while ago, and it seems to me once governments do that, SAIs automatically get a bigger role. So they have to consider accountability for gender equality objectives, they have to assess the implementation of policies and programs, and so on. How does this commitment and engagement of your government reflect on your own SAI and your engagement on gender equality?
Yeah, thank you. Well, the commitment, perhaps you can trace back as far as 32 years ago, because we had a constitution change in 1987, and it explicitly provides for women in nation building and fundamental equality between men and women. And then this was followed by a law in 1992 about women in nation building to give some flesh to that constitutional provision. And then in 2009, we had the Magna Carta for women. Now, as you mentioned, gender-responsive budgeting, back in 1995, our appropriations law provided that 5% of the total appropriations of all national agencies, corporate offices, and local government units must be devoted to gender and development. And so it's a huge amount. When you think about it, it's 5%. Over time, they said, okay, it has to be mainstream because, and this is what I'll discuss later when we go into challenges. No? It has to be mainstream because the budget is really quite huge. And because our mandate is, of course, to audit all disbursements, expenditures, and so on, it's really, even without our wanting to, we are committed to do it. And the Magna Carta for Women specifically mentions the role of the Commission on Audit in ensuring that we do an audit, not just financial and compliance, but more importantly, performance, so that we're supposed to gauge effectiveness, efficiency, and so on of delivery of services that are considered falling under gender and development. So in our annual audit reports of all the agencies we audit, there is a section really on gender and development. And I think the nice thing is we've seen an increase in compliance over the years. There's a greater awareness. There's also greater areas where they're able to utilize the budget. And as I mentioned, these are national agencies, corporate offices, and local government units. These are all consolidated and submitted as a consolidated report to the Commission on Women and the Department of Interior and Local Government. So even if we didn't want to, we have to. But we do want to.
Thank you, Michael. Tsakani, you are a female leader in your own SAI. And I would like to ask you how you see the current situation for female leadership in the SAI world, and whether the fact that you are a female leader in your own SAI has changed your SAI as well.
So if you say that SAI leadership looks like this panel, I guess it's quite evident that there's quite a bit of work that we all have to put in so that we change the look of SAI leadership across the world and do so sustainably. The experience in my SAI South Africa has been, I think, a very good one. And I don't take credit for it because it is the outcome of years of consistent effort to get there. Our SAI has 3,500 people, 53% of those are women. Our executive team has 55% women, including me. And the fact that I'm the first Deputy Auditor-General, as I say, comes out of years and years of focused effort to make sure that there is inclusion of women in the SAI. There is deliberate effort to make sure that the effective participation is brought to bear throughout all the structures in the institution. I think it's also the benefit of very bold strategic choices made by men who led the SAI before I got there. And the collaboration between men and women across different parts of the organization to ensure that we have appropriate policies within the institution that support the strategic choices that have been made. I'll give you an example. We are quite deliberate about having policies around non-discrimination within the environment. And somebody's got to make sure that those policies are implemented appropriately and advocated for actively across the institution. And that requires men and women, and that requires consistent effort around it. So you've got to have the policies, you've got to have the strategic choices made, and then you've got to have the daily grind of putting this thing into effect. The women leaders in the institution that I come from thrive because they demonstrate authentic leadership themselves. They demonstrate a commitment to bring up other women as well. They demonstrate technical and leadership competence in ways that are completely unquestionable. And that allows other women to come into the environment as well. Because when you are in a minority and you see somebody who looks like you thrive, it gives you the belief that it's possible for you as well. And that's half the battle won. And our women have tended to be very strong and resilient in the often tough world of public auditing. And again, that's been a source of major inspiration for younger women within the institution. One of the things that we do also is to celebrate the gains that we make when women win. We profile them internally, externally. We make sure that everybody sees the good work that we're doing. Everybody internally and externally, because that's what inspires and that's what profiles us as a role model organization that other people can aspire to follow. So I think it's been a very good story. The overriding thing is about men and women collaborating on a consistent basis on this.
Thank you. And I just took notice of the importance of role models and also the importance of celebrating.
Absolutely.
Osvaldo, OLACEFS and its member SAIs have been very active on integrating gender into its auditing work. And I think one example that I already mentioned, and which is also an important one, is the region's work on auditing SAI preparedness regarding SDG 5. And I suppose this engagement was also the basis for an extremely interesting survey you did in your region on gender equality within your own SAIs. Can you explain a little bit what this survey was about and highlight some of the outstanding results?
Yeah, as you said, among OLACEFS, as in INTOSAI also, we are committed to comply with SDGs. And we know that the INTOSAI community has defined 4 approaches to face this challenge. One of those approaches is to lead by the example, to act as model of transparency and accountability in our own operations. And we said, well, if we're going to audit governments and to know how they're doing in the implementation of SDG 5, let's take a look on how are we doing inside our institution to lead by the example. So as in parallel with this, with the coordinated audit on SDG 5, I have here, and I can share with you, this is a QR code that can lead you to the micro website we have created. It's in English and in Spanish, with the results of the audit and of the survey, just to spread the word. It's awesome because this survey was answered by 4,459 people that belongs to 22 SAIs. That's quite a number. Every time we carried a survey in OLACEFS, we received 1,000 answers, 800 answers, 1,200 answers, but this time we received more than 4,000 answers. That's quite impressive. And this survey has allowed us to identify within the reality of our SAIs in Latin America and the Caribbean that there is room to improve. Even when the auditors recognize that we are doing some interesting things, there are a lot of things to do. So I would like to highlight some of the findings we made in this survey. First, and regarding gender equality perception over time, we have really good answers. Because in general, auditors say that now we are better than in the past. And they feel that in the future will be better than now. And that was the beginning of the survey. So when we start reviewing the answers, it was, wow, great, we're doing well. But then we get into depth in the questions we made in the survey. And for example, when we ask about the existence of institutional action, we ask our colleagues, and they said that there was a notorious contrast with the optimism that was just described. In general, and even when we didn't ask about any specific policy, dissemination, or procedure, they said that there is an average percentage of agreement between men and women that drops 24% about this positive view they have about the future. So, and most of them think that even that the SAIs are failing in doing a good job to face gender equality challenges, to include women in their daily work. So we need to think, what is sufficient institutional action, or what sufficient institutional actions looks like, because we don't know it. But now, at least we know that there is a problem in that topic. Now, when we go on the perception of the organizational culture of the SAIs, we ask our colleagues to give us their perception about the language we use. And more than 76% in average, between men and male and women, said that in the everyday language, there are gender equality. They perceive it in that way. But when you ask about the institutional speech, that percentage drops to the 59%. I mean, there is gender equality in the day-to-day language, but the institution don't have or don't show a gender equality language. It's crazy, and it's worse when you ask them about mocking or joking about, I don't know, oh, you look straight or things like that, because the percentage drops much more. that make us to think, well, probably people do not link this gender equality language and joking and mocking and doing jokes about women or about being a woman, you know. On the other side, but this showed that in general women feel discriminated in their possibilities of promotion to senior management position. It's not a higher number of answers, but almost 30% of women feel that they have some problems. They think they could have problems to get a promotion in their institution. The worst part of the the worst results we had are those regarding sexual assault harassment cases. It's complicated. Well, this is the average of the whole continent, not just in a specific country. And there probably there are differences between countries. But in general, 40% of women auditors say that they don't know about the existence of procedures for reporting a case of sexual harassment. It's crazy. You said, but you are the first interested person in knowing about this. But 40% of them say that they don't know if there is a procedure. That was their question. And for that 60% that said that they know it, the 60% of that 60% say that they are not aware of the procedure for reporting sexual harassment. So they know that there is a procedure, but they don't know how to use it. So probably there are some things SAIs need to do to disseminate and to share, to explain women what they can do to face any problem in this topic. So procedures that are not clear and not effective to punish perpetrators of sexual assault, and procedures that do not provide remedy for victims, either because victims do not use the procedure, or because the victims that actually have used them do not feel repaired. It's wow. Well, probably results are not quite good, but the good news that the good news that now we know how to carry on fighting the good fight, because we're standing it. And we can move forward to have a policy and to work against this discrimination we already have in our region.
And I think that also shows the importance of data, because you need the data to be able to react. Einar, in IDI, since I'm a member of IDI, we have a new strategic plan since 2019, and better including gender equality is one of our 2 strategic shifts. What was the reason for this shift, and what does it mean for IDI's work with SAIs?
Yes. Integrating gender and working with gender issues is not something that is entirely new in the IDI. I think we've done a lot of things over the years internally. We have a gender policy in place. We did a gender audit back in 2016 that showed very mixed results, to put it mildly. We have a board that basically has gender balance as a target. We haven't met that because we have 70% women on the board, actually. So it's not gender equal in that sense, but we've been really successful in getting a lot of women onto our board. And I also, since I started in the IDI, and now it's, I don't know, 7, 8 years ago, then we tried to push gender in INTOSAI and with SAIs, and the reaction was not positive. It was not welcome to actually speak about, trying to get gender balance in participation in IDI initiatives, etc., etc. But things have really changed remarkably. When we sent out our strategic plan for consultation, we had gender as one strategic shift, and not a single SAI, not a single one said anything negative about it. Rather the opposite. Many, many SAIs came back to us and said that this is the way to go, and we want the IDI to lead by example on this. What does this really mean for us in terms of how we work? Well, obviously it has that internal component about us leading by example and making sure that gender is understood and is actually lived as a value within the IDI. But it also means working with SAIs when it comes to gender. We want to make sure that we try to take a gender lens with our new initiatives. They made a commitment to do a gender analysis, and we're working on a tool for that now, for all new IDI initiatives that starts in 2020 and beyond. And we really want to both share knowledge with SAIs about how they can work with gender, and work with them and support them in undertaking gender efforts, both within their offices and in the audits they do.
Thank you, Einar, and thanks everybody for these very interesting insights into your work and your daily lives in the Supreme Audit institutions and IDI. I would like to come now to the second round of questions and look into the future, looking at what still needs to be done, what still could be done, also challenges we face as SAIs, as INTOSAI bodies, and how we can raise awareness about gender equality in SAIs and also in INTOSAI bodies. Osvaldo, I would like to start with you. Making gender more visible to men and women, I think that's an important first step, and data is important as we just established. I think the results of your survey are also quite eye-opening, and I think it gives a lot of food for thought. But now, how about the next steps? How can we better engage the heads of SAIs, but also all the men and women working in the different SAIs? And what can OLACEFS potentially do to raise awareness in OLACEFS, but maybe even beyond?
Yeah, well, that's the word, awareness. We have a huge duty on the future, but we have started in 2012. In 2012 was the first year when OLACEFS started thinking or include the concept gender in an official document. It was the Declaration of Santo Domingo, when the head of our SAIs were talking about fighting against corruption. And for some reason, they include in a line saying that it's important to consider women in the fighting against corruption and also gender equality within our SAIs. I don't know why, but it's there. And for us, it was the first step to consider OLACEFS working in gender equality. Because of that declaration, in 2014, we carried out our first audit on gender equality. It was a small audit. We just received 3 SAIs interested in participating. Puerto Rico, my colleagues are here. Costa Rica, Ms. Marta Costa is presenting in the hall in front, and Chile. And we said, well, we're failing, because we invited 22 members, we just received 3 interested SAIs in participating, but the impact of that audit was awesome, because after we present the results, all the other SAIs said, we want to participate in a new audit on gender, because they realized that it's possible to audit gender. That's why we started with this second audit on SDG 5, started in 2018, it is a joint effort with IDI, and which its results I'm presenting now. In 2013, we signed an MOU with UN Women, and because of that, well, have you seen this pin? This is a present of the Executive Director of UN Women. when we went to present her the results of the audit, she gave it to me saying, well, you're part of the He for She initiative because you're a man working for women, and I'm very proud of that. So we have this agreement, and in fact, the forward of this of our consolidated report, it's made by the Executive Director of UN Women. We're also now working in strongly working, that would be very tough because we're in a kind of macho-oriented society in Latin America and the Caribbean, but working with a language inclusive of neutral documents, mainly because you know that Spanish is very tricky to speak with non-gender bias because you have males and female words for everything. So it's kind of difficult, but we're working on that. And also, in our assembly, in 2 more weeks, will be held in El Salvador, we included first a panel in which we're going to present the results of the audit, we're going to present the results of the survey, then we invite UN Women and civil society organizations to discuss with us and to present their point of view, and after that, we will have a workshop with the head of SAIs to discuss the results of the survey, the results of the audit, and the idea is to use that discussion as the first step to define a gender policy for the region. First for the OLACEFS region, and then for every SAI in our region. So that's where we're looking for the awareness purposes.
Thank you, and I think it's very encouraging that only a few can have a big impact. I think hopefully this will also apply for this meeting, so we'll see about the future. Tsakani, your SAI's vision is to be recognized by all our stakeholders as a relevant SAI that enhances public sector accountability. What will your SAI do to make this vision come true equally for men and women?
Thanks. Just before I answer that question, I have to say that, Osvaldo, you presented this report at a session we had together in Cape Town about 3-4 months ago, and it had such a big impression on me. So if there are members in the audience that haven't read this report, I would encourage you to do so, because it gives very useful insights on things that we could be doing differently within our SAIs. So Petra, you're asking what is it that we would be wanting to do differently as a SAI? So I've spoken to you a lot about what we've done internally, and now the question becomes, what does it mean in terms of how do we shape the audit work that we conduct, the way we engage our stakeholders in a way that's going to add value into this process of driving gender equality. So we're starting really with the softer controls, and then we'll deal with the harder controls, because that's kind of how you drive change. You've got to deal with the soft controls and then keep building the harder controls. We started over the last 2 years looking at the institutions that deal with matters around gender equality and looking at them across government. And we've looked specifically at SDG 5 and how our government is dealing with the different programs, government programs that are designed to drive gender equality, and programs that are happening across government. So we've done a thought leadership piece based on the work that we've done. It's preliminary work that says, what does the department that's there for women do? What do the other public entities do, the state-owned entities, the various departments, in giving effect to the policy direction that's been stated by the Department of Women? And what is its role relative to the Commission for Gender Equality, which is a constitutional body that reports directly into Parliament? And we were able to give insights to the department that's responsible for monitoring and evaluation on key gaps in performance planning, just in planning, not even evaluation, just in performance planning, around how we cascade the policy imperatives from the department responsible for women right into the different government agencies. And we're hoping that's part of the contribution that we can start to build on. It is not punitive work. It doesn't go into audit reports. It doesn't enjoy big public scrutiny, but it is part of what we're doing as we shape the value-adding conversations with government and with Parliament on the things they could do to make sure that they minimize overlap, they minimize fragmentation, how they're approaching the conversations on how to deal with gender equality policy. One of the other areas that we're looking at now is the role of the criminal justice system around gender-based violence, and what are the weaknesses in that system that make it difficult for our country to deal with what is a very worrying scourge around gender-based violence. So that's a piece of work that's going to enjoy some focus from our side. Again, still in the softer touch. You're unlikely to see it in the public domain, but it is part of the work that we use when we engage with government to say, we have the advantage of looking at all of government. We have the advantage of looking in specific terms at different institutions within government. This is what we're observing that you could improve if you are to achieve the goals that you've set for yourselves. So it's really, as I say, using the fact that we have the advantage of looking at different institutions differently and bringing that to bear as a benefit into government.
Thank you, and I think that's really encouraging. It's encouraging to know what's going on in your institution and how you're working on this issue. Michael, your SAI, as we've heard, is already very engaged on gender equality issues, but I'm sure you must have some challenges as a SAI, but also your staff may face some challenges. Can you tell us a little bit more about these challenges, and also maybe how you as a SAI can raise awareness?
It's actually not been too difficult because we've never had a major gender equality issue really in the Philippines. If you look at surveys and rankings, we're usually among the top when it comes to gender equality, and I think it's part of it may be cultural. But don't get me wrong, I'm not saying it's a perfect gender equality example. We still do have, gender biases that still exist and so on. But if you're going to talk about glass ceilings and so on, it doesn't actually exist. Even in the Commission on Audit, 80% of my auditors are actually women. And 60% of my entire workforce, which is about 9,000 people, are actually women. And my assistant commissioners, 10 of them, I think 7 are women. So there's never been that kind of a restriction or so on. Of course, we're speaking generally. So the idea of gender equality in terms of opportunity hasn't really been much of an issue. But there are still a lot of gender equality issues. Now, insofar as the SAI is concerned, we do have a gender-responsive budget. And like I mentioned, 5% of the total appropriations of national agencies, corporate offices, and local government units have to be devoted to gender and development. And the problem at the very start was they did not clearly define what activities could fall under this. And it's only in the last maybe 3 to 5 years that they started opening up. At one point, we even criticized them, the Philippine Commission on Women, because we said, how many seminars can you actually hold, to cover 5% of the budget? It's not going to happen. And luckily for our SAI, we've had an assistant commissioner and a director who have been our focal persons in this. And they've been attending the UN meetings, and they've been very actively engaging. They're very proactive. And they were actually able to influence our Commission on Women to broaden the usage of the fund, because really our findings early on was the money was not being utilized because they didn't know how and where, other than holding seminars on sexual harassment and so on and so forth. Now, there's a bit more because it is gender and development. So there is a wellness aspect that's also included there. And there are other aspects that they could actually do. So the challenge is, of course, broadening it so that they're able to utilize the fund. And the second challenge, of course, is making this known to the agencies. Because you talk to the agency head about gender and development funds or gender responsive budgeting, it's not one of his main priorities. If I'm Secretary of Transportation, I know what my priorities are, and mainstreaming the budget, that's not something they would prioritize. That is something that they would leave to a middle manager or so on. So you have to make it simpler for them so that they can easily accept it without it being a problem for them. And so that's one of the issues. With some of our auditors, especially the older ones, getting them to understand this concept, it was a challenge at the start. I think, some of them are retiring already, so the younger people seem to be more responsive. So we're quite optimistic about doing this. You mentioned we got an award. I was hearing Osvaldo and Einar saying they need to be an example. And that was our philosophy there. We're the ones auditing the budget on gender and development. We have to make sure we prove to be an example for the rest. And so we actually got the highest award among all government agencies, but with still a lot of improvement, because the highest award only got a bronze medal. So no one got silver and gold. So there's still room for improvement. That's something we do recognize and something we do work at. Of course, there are issues of, workload management and so on, but these are operational issues. What's important, though, is we're already doing an audit of the gender and development for the last 10 years, a summary, so that we can see the level of mainstreaming, how it's actually been operating. And the 10 years is based on 2009, when the Magna Carta for Women was passed into law. And of course, one last point is, I think one of the ways we can meet these challenges also is there's INTOSAI Gov 94 400, I think, that talks about policy evaluation. And I think that's something we have to adopt to able to look more at, how do we evaluate actual policies? It's something that we want to get into. We've actually joined the working group on policy evaluation. And so I think this is one way we can also meet some of the challenges regarding gender in development. Yes.
Thank you, Michael. That was really interesting. Einar, a short question for you. How will IDI help to advance gender equality in its work with SAIs?
It's a short question, but the answer is slightly longer. I would first say that, the IDI, every year we work with around 150 SAIs, and I think we have a very big sort of convening power in bringing SAIs together. And with that convening power comes also a responsibility for actually taking this gender issue forward. And I also very firmly believe that one size does not fit all when it comes to gender. I think we really have to respect the fact that we are very diverse supreme audit institutions working in very diverse societies. And what works in one region might not work in another region. So we need to have a sort of differentiated approach. I would always say that I think there's at least 4 things we can do as IDI to actually help SAIs on this. The one is that we can help SAIs and support SAIs in sort of promoting gender equality within their own operations and the way they lead by example. That can be when we work with the human resources and the professionalization initiatives. To give an example, for instance, we work a lot with SAIs in developing the strategic plans. And what we find very often is that if you open the consultations on a strategic plan to also include questions like gender within the SAI and even with other stakeholders, you get quite surprising results that actually might get management to actually understand that gender is an issue, both internally and what actually people expect from us. So that's one aspect on it. The other one is to actually work with SDGs and sort of gender-related goals and targets, like we did with our colleagues in OLACEFS, and it was a really rewarding experience for us. The third one is trying to take that gender lens when you do an audit. I think Achana used a very good example yesterday in terms of roads. How do you consider gender when you decide to make a decision on where you build a road? And I think many SAIs do not have that experience in terms of taking that gender lens. And I think for actually most issues, you can take a gender lens, and you probably should also have that gender lens, amongst others. So trying to integrate and support SAIs in doing that. And the fourth, I think, is by us as IDI actually leading by example when it comes to gender. And actually be a little bit pushy when it comes to INTOSAI and also the regions to try to get this on the agenda so it gets the attention it deserves.
Thank you, Einar, and thanks to all of you. I'm sure the audience is already thinking how they can integrate gender issues in their own institutions. And I'm also very happy to have Monica Gonzalez from the INTOSAI General Secretariat with us, who was probably thinking the same question for the INTOSAI General Secretariat and what they could maybe do to contribute. Can I invite you to give a small comment on that, Monica? And we may need the microphone.
Thank you, Petra, and congratulations for organizing this first gender event in INTOSAI. And I'm very pleased to hear that OLACEFS has already planned something like this in 2 weeks. So it's again vanguard in INTOSAI as in many other aspects. And the first thing that occurs to me then is, in general, we could try to make more gender equality events in INTOSAI or add them to other INTOSAI events. I think this would be very good to raise the awareness. And the second point, I think it's really necessary for the coming strategic plan for INTOSAI for the time 23 to 28. We just created here in the governing board before the Congress a task force on strategic planning. And it will be led by the US, and I'm so happy to have Michelle beside me because she will be mainly responsible for the strategic plan, and I'm quite sure she will take up this gender issue quite thoroughly. The second point is that as INTOSAI, I think we have to encourage the member SAIs for a composition of their staff taking into account the gender issue. Because even I was sitting on the podium quite some time in this Congress, and I admit it's much better than it was years ago, but still there was a vast majority of male participants. And in some points, sometimes still, it's like attending a gentleman club if you come to an INTOSAI event, and this is something we definitely should try to change within the next years. And this is only, and I think you spoke before about SAIs being a role model, and this is again like a mirror to INTOSAI, because usually the leadership is taking part in INTOSAI events, and this is also why we have this male dominance in INTOSAI events like the Congress. So this is another point to encourage member SAIs to also have more female leading positions. I think it's very promising. I learned from Einar that the Young Leadership Program this time, about, I think from out of 20, there are 19 female participants, so I think it is really promising. Things will hopefully change in INTOSAI. And another thing we could possibly promote is to create a kind of network of the female Auditor-Generals, because they might, with their experiences, also work out a kind of best practice, which might also serve for other SAIs, seeing that there are really advantages. And this brings me to the point that at least now, since 2016, INTOSAI has for the very first time a female Secretary General, which is already a big step in advance. And most certainly, but this is, I think, Osvaldo has already covered it quite well, is gender audits, and especially also within our efforts in the implementation of the SDGs, and especially their SDG 5. And something else that, for example, we are doing in the Austrian Code of Audit, we are doing a cross-mentoring for females between the different public institutions, and it may never be the mentee and the mentor from the same institution. And this could be something we could possibly establish between different SAIs, and nowadays with all the electronic media, that I think it's feasible to do something like this. And this could also help some SAIs and directly learn from experiences from others. Thank you.
Thank you, Monica. And I think there's a lot of food for thought, and I already know that Einar wants to comment on that. So before I turn to the audience for questions, Einar, please, unless others want to comment as well.
Thank you, Monica. I share what you're saying. And I just wanted to reflect a little bit about a couple of the things you said. One was this Young Leaders Program. When we started the Young Leaders Program, this was not meant to be 19 out of 20 being ladies. They were actually picked because of merit. They were the best candidates, 19 out of 20. And it really shows the immense talent, and some of them are actually sitting here in the back. It really shows the immense talent we have in terms of young female leaders within our SAIs. The challenge is actually to grow these ladies and actually give them opportunities to advance within their SAIs, to actually go into also the most senior positions in the SAIs. Also, I think the Congress has really demonstrated which strong female AGs we have in the community. I mean, we have a lot of them, and it is increasing. It's still too few, but they are really sensational Auditor-General. The next statement I'm going to make, it's probably not statistically proven, but I'll still make it. I mean, we work a lot with SAIs, and we see also where things go wrong. I always say that building up a supreme audit institution that is trusted by the people takes years and years and years, decades often. And it takes one idiot 5 minutes to ruin the whole reputation by doing something immoral or something stupid. To this date, I've seen a lot of things go wrong in a lot of SAIs. And it's very, very rarely it's a woman that leads those SAIs. It's typically SAIs led by men in their late 50s, early 60s that get into these situations. I'm not saying that this is statistically proven, but it's certainly an observation which is worth keeping in mind.
Thank you, Einar.